Thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you to the Women's Beit Midrash, to Shelly Davis for hosting, and for enabling me to have the opportunity to learn some Torah with you this morning in preparation for this amazing opportunity that we all have coming up this week. So when I was in graduate school, many years ago, at Columbia, I had to take a class in, part of my program was in the religion department, and we had classes on, religion that were meant to be taught by historians and sort of experts in various religions. So in one of the lectures, there was a professor who was speaking. He was not Jewish and he was not speaking about Judaism, but he did mention matzah. And I was sitting, it wasn't a very large class, it was a seminar class. And he started talking about matzah and how the ancient Hebrews, made this matzah. And he said, they still eat it today, only today it's called bagels. And I was like sitting in the class and I was like, hi, that's not actually accurate. We actually do eat the same matzah today that they ate in ancient Egypt, and how it's told to us in the Torah, that's actually the same matzah that we eat today. And it was such a funny experience. I mean, also it's not like there's a shortage of Jews in New York, so I'm sure he had met Jews before in his life, but it was a really interesting experience because one of the ideas of studying, religion as history is that there were these ancient rituals that people used to do and they don't do them anymore. And in Judaism, we really don't see our rituals in that way. We just started, Sefer Vayikra, so obviously there are things that there are mitzvot, there are rituals that are taught to us in the Torah that we don't actually participate in anymore, but there are many that we do and that have been handed down to us for thousands of years. And of course, eating matzah on Pesach is one of them. We're still doing it because we really see it not just as a zecher to what they did back then, but we understand that eating matzah and celebrating Pesach is something that is not just relevant to our lives, but is essential to our yearly cycle of life. Let me explain a little bit more what I mean by sharing my screen and going into a source sheet. Okay, so this is the first source on this. Oops, let's close this document recovery. Oh, can't do that. Okay, whatever. You see my document recoveries. This, can you all see the source sheet? Yeah, okay, great. So the first source on the page is from the Pesach Haggadah. You'll all be familiar with it. It comes right after Dayenu. It's like that part of the Seder where we're like, we're almost at the food, right? And it's essentially when Rabban Gamliel, we say the three things, right? Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, and we all know that that's a sign that we're coming close to the meal. But we say this very important paragraph, and it's actually from the Mishnah. Bechol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim. Right? In every generation, a person is obligated to see themselves as if they went out of Mitzrayim. Shne'emar vehigadeta levincha, as it says, you shall tell your son, your child, b'yom hahu lemor, on this day, saying, ba'avur zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeiti mimitzrayim. It is because of this, which is, what Hashem did for me when I went out of Mitzrayim. Lo et avotenu bilvad ga'al hakadosh baruch hu, not just our fathers were redeemed from Egypt, ela af otanu ga'al imahem, but rather we also were, redeemed and are, being redeemed with them. Shne'emar ve'otanu hotzi misham, as it says, he took us out Leman heviotanu latet lanu et haaretz asher nishba la'avotenu, in order to bring us to the land which he swore to our fathers to give to us and gave to us. And it's very much this concept of it, the Seder and the retelling the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim is not a zecher, it's not some historical ritual that we're doing, but rather it is an energy that we are drawing down into the world, because every year at this time, this is the energy that is in the world. And so because of the first geula, right? They say that like all gullus is based on, right, our understanding of all exiles, excuse me, our understanding of all exiles is based on the exile of Mitzrayim, and our understanding of all geula, of all redemption, is based on the redemption of us from Mitzrayim. And that it's not just something that we talk about that happened back then, but rather b'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lirot et atzmo, right? So we have to see ourselves as if we ourselves went out of Mitzrayim. Now, I know obviously that, and we all know, I'm sure, families who like, you put a sack of something on your shoulder and you walk around the table and really, act it out. But obviously there's something deeper here, okay? We are not slaves in Mitzrayim. And even when we talk about the time periods in Jewish history where people were slaves, specifically, for those of you who don't know, I'm a guide at Yad Vashem, so I very much deal, this year has been a little bit different, but I very much deal with the stories of Jews in that time period and how they really did anything that they could in order to be able to celebrate Pesach. And there are many questions, right? Because, for example, there's a testimony, one of my favorite testimonies in the museum is Rabbi Sinai Adler, who talks about how when he got to Mauthausen, he was 17 years old around, and basically there was like there was a lot of organizing going on. The Nazis, Yimach Shema, were trying to figure out like where to put everybody, and they had sort of this like free time, we'll call it, right? And they were able to sort of walk around this empty area. And he and a bunch of his friends who had all been yeshiva bachrim in Prague, they realized that it was Erev Pesach. It was, the time of the Seder basically. And they wanted to do something lezecher Pesach. So he talks about how they didn't have anything, they certainly didn't have, matzah. They had, he talked about how they didn't have maror, but maror they had plenty of in the situation that they were in. So what could they do to create a Seder for themselves? So the Haggadah, they could tell the story of Pesach. So they started saying from memory anything that they could think of. And they got to the part, Avadim Hayinu, and they said, Avadim Hayinu, like we were slaves. What are we now if not also still slaves? But then they basically had this whole discussion about how they felt like slaves, but there was a difference. The slavery in Mitzrayim, this is what he says, the slavery in Mitzrayim was not just a physical slavery, it was also a spiritual slavery. And ever since we were redeemed from Mitzrayim, we do not have that same element of spiritual slavery to another nation. We may be physically enslaved to many things, and I'll kind of break that down as we go further, but it's not the same as it was in Mitzrayim, that the redemption from Mitzrayim set the tone or set opened a gateway to our ability to redeem ourselves over and over and over again. So with that in mind, I'd like to talk about looking at Mitzrayim, at Yetzias Mitzrayim, at Pesach in a different way. So I'll go back to the source sheet for a second, and I'll show you this word Mitzrayim, right? Yetzias Mitzrayim. But if you vowelize it a different way, this word could read Meitzarim. Meitzarim means limitations or restrictions, right? Min ha-Matzah karatika, right? From the restriction, from the small part, from the narrow place, I call out to you, Hashem, right? That's the whole idea of a shofar, that the opening that we call out from is this narrow place, and then it opens into a wide place, right? Anani bamerchavka, right? You answered me from your place of wideness, but of, you know, sort of ability to see the big picture. And on a personal level, therefore, we can say that every year when we're discussing Yitzias Mitzrayim, really, what are we trying to do? We're trying to latzet min ha-Meitzarim for each one of us, right? We're trying to actually leave our own place of limitations or restrictions. Now, this is different for every person. This idea of being stuck, an idea of, you know, seeing things from a certain perspective only, this idea of feeling constricted or, you know, mistaken in our self-perceptions or our perceptions of other people, or stuck in a place of judgment or a place of fear or a place of all kinds of, you know, even down to like the practical places of being in a fight with someone, or, you know, feeling a negative sort of perception that someone feels about us, right? These are all places of restriction. These are all places from which I can't really grow because I'm stuck in them. And so Yitzias Mitzrayim every year is not just about the Jews leaving Egypt that first time. It's about every single one of us enabling ourselves to leave, or to start, let's say, leaving our own personal place of constriction, our own personal place of limitation. And that's really the, if you want to label it, that's like the Chassidus on Pesach. And that's why Pesach is still so relevant to us today, when we can tap into the, I would even take out the word still, you know, Pesach is so relevant to us every year in every stage of our lives, when we see it through the paradigm of this energy that we can tap into. When we see it in terms of our own personal spiritual growth, our own personal emotional growth, our own personal physical growth, that we ourselves can find our own place in the rituals of the Seder, and of course in the holiday of Pesach. Now, how can we do that, right? Now, it's very nice to say we can tap into that energy, but there's actually a physical sort of step-by-step plan that the Torah lays out for us, and we'll delve deeply into that. So when we talk about the mitzvah of eating matzah, okay, when we talk about the mitzvah of Pesach, when we're given the mitzvah of Pesach, so in Shmos, Perek Yud Beis, it says Shivas Yamim matzos tochelu, right? 7 days you should eat matzahs, unleavened bread. Ach bayom harishon tashbitu saor mibatechem. On the very first day, you should remove the leaven from your houses, chametz, right? Saor is chametz. Ki kol ochel chametz v'nichreta hanefesh hahu miYisrael. Because anyone who eats chametz, anyone who eats leavening from the first day to the seventh day, so that person that's kares, right? That person's nichreta, they will be cut off from the rest of the nation, from the souls of Am Yisrael, miyom harishon ad yom hashvi'i. So we're told, you know, this 7-day period, we have to eat matzah and we have to remove the chametz. So if we reverse that order, right, we come up with a very, very common statement that we all know, which is sor meira ve'aseh tov. Okay, we remove the chametz and we eat the matzah. That is, it falls very perfectly and beautifully, because it's all set up this way, right, from Hashem, from the Torah. It falls into the framework of sor meira ve'aseh tov. Now, right, we should go away from what's bad, and we should do what's good. Now, what's interesting about it is that, chametz is only forbidden this 1 week of the year, right? There's no other, right now I can eat as much bread as I want. Obviously I have other, things that I have to think about in terms of my health, but right now there's nothing evil per se about the chametz that's in my house, and that's very interesting. But there is actually another restriction on chametz in the Torah. It's not just Pesach when we're restricted from chametz. And we'll go back to the source sheet. I really like to, see everybody's names and not just stay on the source sheet. So I hope you don't mind me going back and forth. In Vayikra, and we actually just read it this week. It was this week's parsha, so it was perfect that we're talking about it right around this time. When we're given the mitzvah of the mincha, the korban mincha, the Torah tells us, Kol hamincha asher takrivu laHashem lo ta'aseh chametz. No mincha offering, no meal offering that we bring up on the mizbeach can have any chametz in it. It can't have any leavening in it. Ki kol saor v'kol dvash lo taktiru mimenu ishel laHashem. That no saor, like we said, is chametz. It's a synonym for chametz. No leavening, and no honey. Right, can be turned into a korban, into smoke, as an offering to Hashem. And if you were reading, parsha sheets and divrei Torah, there's a lot of divrei Torah on that. What's with the saor, what's with the dvash. We're going to focus on the aspect that relates to us in terms of Pesach and the inner aspect of Yitzias Mitzrayim and Yitzias Meitzarim. So we'll go right to the Gemara, where it says in Brachas. Now, this is a discussion of like different ways that we can, different things that we should pray for, different ways that we can that we can pray. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Alexandri Bitar, Rabbi Alexandri would daven, okay, after the Matzah, after he would like pray extra after his davening, Amar Hachi, and he would say thus: Ribon ha'olamim, Hashem, Galui v'yadua lefanecha. It is known to you. Sheritzonenu la'asot ritzoncha. That is really our deepest desire, to do your ratzon, to do what you ask of us. Umi ma'akev. But what stops us from doing what you ask of us? What causes us to do aveiras? Saor sheba'isa, the yeast that's in the dough, v'shiabud malchuyot, and the enslavement of the nations, or the oppression by the nations. Yiratzon mefanecha, it may be your will. Shetatzilenu miyadam, that you will save us from their hands, from the hands of both of these things. V'nashuv la'asot chukei ritzonecha b'levav shalem, and you should help us to return to do what you require of us, the laws that you have given us, with a full heart. And Rashi says to that Gemara, Se'or shebe'isa, what is the leavening in the dough? Yetzahara. It's our Yetzahara. Shebelavavenu hamachmitzenu, that it machmitzes our hearts. It leavens our hearts. It causes our hearts to basically turn into chametz. And I'm just gonna, if everybody can put themselves on mute, that would be great, because
this t-shirt is not memory for anyone.
There we go. Okay. And I'm just going to go straight down to the Sefer HaChinuch, because the Sefer HaChinuch brings out another like aspect, or the dimension that we're going to really be talking about. Ve'od shamati, and I also heard, is in a discussion of what this isur is. Tam be'isur saor dvash, right? What's the isur of leavening and honey? Lefisha hasaor magbia atzmo, because the saor, the leavening, magbia atzmo, it causes us to raise ourselves up, or it raises our self up. Okay. V'ken. Oh, wait, let me just finish this one source, and then I'm gonna. I see that your hand is raised, Rachel. Hold on 1 second. V'chen advash ma'ale retichato harbe, and the honey sort of brings up this like an aspect of our personality that we don't really want to bring up. It like sort of boils us. V'lachen nitrachaku leramez. And therefore we have to separate ourselves. We have to distance ourselves from it. Because ki toavat Hashem kol gava lev, and that's from Mishlei. Because it's disgusting to Hashem, this idea of gava lev, this idea of a prideful heart. Okay, Rachel, you wanted to say something? Oh.
No, it was a mistake. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem. I just wanted to make sure that if anybody has any questions, please feel free to stop me and to raise them. I'm happy to hear from you. It's always, Zoom is like a balance between wanting to share, but also wanting to hear ideas, and it's a little bit hard to do that. But that's the idea that we want to go into, and that the Sefer HaChinuch basically says, and Rashi points out, so or leavening is compared to the Yetzer Hara. Now, the Sefer HaChinuch brought out this part of it, right? Why is leavening compared to the Yetzer Hara? Because there's this aspect of puffing ourselves up, of pride. And the analogy that I always use is if we think of making challah, or we think of making bread, and we put the dough in the bowl, right? And it rises, hopefully, if our yeast is good. And normally, like, that's a good thing, but this is the image, okay? That the dough rises and it takes up all of the space in the bowl. And sometimes it even overflows the bowl, right? And we have to understand that on some level, that can be a negative thing, because essentially when it represents our ego, then it's basically saying we're allowing, our ego, our self-image, our own ideas about ourselves, our pride, all of these things, when we allow it to grow and grow and grow, so then it takes up all the space, and there's no space for anyone else. There's no space for anyone else's ideas. There's no space for Hashem. And the whole idea, the whole concept of matzah is really that it's flat. And so when you have the image in your mind of like punching down the dough in your bowl, so you're popping all those, hot air bubbles essentially, and you're making room. And that's really the whole idea of Pesach. That's really the whole idea of in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, of not having chametz on the mizbeach, because what is the whole idea of a korban? The whole idea of a korban is that we are coming to Hashem, as showing gratitude, as showing apology, as servants of Hashem, and saying, you are the master over us, and we are doing this because you told us to. And there's an element of bittul or anava, right? Of bittul is always translated as like self-nullification in English. It's like the worst translation ever. But bittul essentially means, making a space for Hashem. And we know, hold on, I'll hold off on that for a second. And anava, which is, of course, humility. And we have to come with those character traits. We have to come with those elements with the korban, because otherwise, it's not an acceptable korban. And so if we come and we're saying, like if we come full puffed up with pride, ki'ilu, putting like leavening on the mizbeach, then we're not doing it with the right kavanah, and that korban is not acceptable to Hashem.
What were the two? Bitul and what was the second?
Anava.
Anava.
So bittul, which is a very, very important concept in Torah. It's a very important concept that is discussed a lot by the Hasidic masters, by the Hasidic Rebbeim. We know that this is it's a term that's used for what we do to our chametz before Pesach, right? Bittul chametz is like the whole concept of destroying the chametz, and it, it's all part of this same paradigm of looking of sor meira, right? Of staying away from chametz. We bittul the chametz in order to make room for this week of eating only unleavened bread. So I want to just, I want to take that further. But I want to tell a story also, because stories always enable these words to really go into our hearts in a deeper way. So there's a beautiful story about the Noda Yehuda. The Noda Yehuda was the chief rabbi of Prague. He was from Poland, but he became the chief rabbi of Prague, and and he lived in the 18th century. So we always we have to understand always when we're telling stories from earlier generations, that the relationships between Jews and the Christian world around them was not a good one necessarily. Basically, there were a lot of issues, and there were a lot of persecution. There was a lot of oppression, and so these kinds of stories, although they feel like a little bit less, they feel kind of like not PC, because of the relationship, then it's historically accurate. So the Noda Yehuda was one night leaving his shul and going home, and he came across this young boy, a non-Jewish boy, kind of dressed in like very shabby clothing and crying, and he's holding these empty baskets. And the Rav says to him, why are you crying? And the boy has a very hard time, stop calming down enough to say. He said, my father is a baker, and my mother passed away, and my father remarried, and I have like a wicked stepmother essentially, and she loads up my baskets every day, and I have to go and sell the bread, and I cannot come home until all the bread has been sold. And the Rav looks in the baskets and he sees there's no more bread. And he says, but you've sold all the bread. And the boy starts crying hysterically again. And he says, I've sold all the bread, but the money is gone. Someone, it fell, someone took it. I have no idea. I don't know where the money went. And so I can't go home. And I don't think I could ever go home. And he's just hysterical. And the Noda Yehuda brings him, he says, come with me, brings him to his office. And he gives him the amount of money, which was 30 gold pieces. That he needed to bring home to his stepmother, and that would have been the amount that he would gold, 30 coins. That was the amount that he needed to bring home in order to be able to go home. And the boy thanks him, and that's the end of that chapter. Many years later, it's essentially Erev Pesach, and there's a knock at the Noda Yehuda's door. And he opens it, and this man says to him, I don't know if you remember me, but many years ago you helped me out, and it's this boy, and he's grown up, but his wicked stepmother is still pretty wicked, and unfortunately she has convinced the bakers in the city to be part of a plot against the Jewish community. That they all know that the night after Pesach ends, that all the Jews in the city go and they buy their bread from the non-Jewish bakers, because they need bread, and they don't have, their bakeries are all shut down, and that's like that's what they used to do, just practically speaking, to be able to have bread after Pesach, halachically, in terms of owning the flour. Well, you all know what I'm talking about. So they used to buy their bread from the non-Jewish bakers. And this stepmother had convinced the non-Jewish bakers to put poison in the bread, because all of that bread was going to be sold to the Jewish community. And this was this, grand plot to sort of get rid of the Jews. And he says, I'm telling you this because of the kindness that you did for me, but you have to promise me that you will not reveal where you got this information. And so the Noda Yehuda thanks him and promises him, and now he's left with a problem. What am I going to say? I can't, I can't reveal this. There's going to be mass panic, and it may cause a pogrom, and all these political challenges and emotional challenges that go along with this knowledge. But at the same time, I can't allow the Jewish community to buy this bread. So he does something very, very interesting. On the night before, like basically the Shvi, let's say the Shvi Shel Pesach, he calls together the entire community, and he says all the shuls should be shut, and all the Jews, in those days, a chief rabbi had that kind of power, and he calls all the Jews together to his shul, and he says to them, my dear Yidden, the rabbis have made a mistake. we've made a mistake in calculating the calendar for this year. We were wrong. We started Pesach on the wrong day. And therefore, we actually have 2 more days of Chag. And the Jewish community, they didn't have anything there was no internet. It's already Yontif. Anyway, so they, of course, obeyed. And they basically extended Pesach 1 whole day. And in that way, nobody bought the bread, and everybody was then safe. So, but I found that I think it's like a very, very interesting idea, because he basically nullified himself. He's basically saying, I made this mistake, and now the Noda Yehuda was a great Torah scholar, and it was very humble and very just call it humble, right? Of him to basically stand up in front of the entire community of Prague and say, I made a mistake. And through that, the Jewish community, through his willingness to do that, the Jewish community was saved. But he said, why was the Jewish community saved? Because of a kindness, a tzedakah that an old man once did for a young boy. And I think they go hand in hand. For us, obviously, there's the idea before Pesach of Kimcha de Pischa, that we collect, obviously with every Chag, but with Pesach, it's a very specific intention that everyone in the Jewish community should be able to afford matzah, that, Kimcha, Kemach, right, that they should be able to have the flour that they need in order to be able to eat matzah, because eating matzah is so important. But part of that is also giving tzedakah, and giving tzedakah in the best way, let's say, right, should come out of this same mentality, this same framework, that I'm doing this because, not because I'm great and because, I am going to take care of somebody else, but because I care about somebody else, because their needs are important to me. And again, it all goes back to the same idea of like the dough rising over the top doesn't leave room for that. The dough rising over the top doesn't, that full-blown ego doesn't have space for somebody else's needs and somebody else's pain and somebody else's limitations and places of constriction, right? So how do we get into that mindset? We get into that mindset with B'dikas Chametz. B'dikas Chametz is in Hasidus, they really talk about like B'dikas Chametz as the gateway to to everything. Okay, and like we said at the beginning, right? We don't think of Pesach as like lezecher, what happened a long time ago. We see Pesach as an opportunity every year. The Jewish calendar, the Jewish worldview is that we are on this ongoing spiral. Okay, every year we celebrate the same chagim. Every year we do the same things over and over and over again. But the concept is that we do them from a different place. That hopefully through our learning and through our working on ourselves, that every year we're in a different place, and therefore we have a different perspective, a new perspective, hopefully a deeper perspective. From which and through which we can look at the chagim and we can look at ourselves. So every year we do this B'dikas Chametz, and we do it with a candle. Okay, so I'll just share the screen just to have the source in front of you. But basically, I'll come back to the Emek Davar in 1 second. But the pasuk from Mishlei, which is so la'inyan. Ner Hashem nishmat Adam, that the candle of God is the soul of man. Chapes kol chadrei baten, and it can look, or it can seek in all of the the inner places. And I one of the reasons why I love that so much is because baten beten is like when we look with the candle for the chametz. I mean, obviously on a physical level, we're looking for bread, right? And it's always this curious thing because we've already cleaned our houses, and then we wrap up, in like tinfoil or whatever it is, or paper, whatever it is. And we like hide these pieces of bread around. It's such a counterintuitive thing, right? We've just cleaned the whole house and now we're going to put bread around. But the whole idea is that we are physical beings. And therefore, when we do something, we can't really internalize something that's totally spiritual. Rather, we do a physical act that represents something that has greater spiritual depth. So we're seeking the chametz. We go into all the rooms of our houses and we're seeking out these very specific, physical pieces of bread. But on a spiritual level, on an emotional level, we are really intended to be, sort of acting out this idea of looking in ourselves, looking in all of our rooms, looking in our beten, looking in our stomach, looking in our soul. And that's why one of the reasons why we use a candle is that the candle symbolizes the soul. We could use a flashlight, we could leave the lights on, whatever, all these things, but we don't. We use a candle because there's an element of connection there, that when we're going around with this candle, it sort of opens these doors in our soul and in our psyche that, this candle is really me. This candle is my soul. And I'm looking in my soul, for the chametz. I'm enabling this, searching out of my own soul for the chametz, for the ego that I'm trying to get rid of. And so through that ritual of bedikas chametz, we can enter into this gateway of having a new mindset, of letting go of those perceptions that we had, of opening ourselves up to others. I know, like when I was a kid, I don't know about everybody else, but we had we had these big family seders that always ended up in fights and screaming and in but that generation, my mother's a survivor, Baruch Hashem, and her older brothers and sisters were quite traumatized, affected by the war, traumatized, let's all say, right? Our whole that whole generation was really traumatized. So there was a lot of baggage, and there was a lot of stuff that everybody kind of brought with them to the Seder. And really the whole purpose of this is that we can try to come to the Seder. I'll give us all a bracha, like I'm not finished yet, but I'll give us a bracha in the middle of this year, that like we should, use the bedikas chametz to sort of open ourselves up to coming to the Seder this year, with our bags sort of, I don't know, like open and ready to be like unpacked and, ready to take somebody else's, pain in, or so, that kind of mindset, that framework of like, I'm letting go, I'm bittul chametz, I'm trying at least to remove that aspect of myself to be able to come to the Seder with like, a little bit of a more open mindset, a little bit of a more open heart to, to those that I'm sitting at the Seder with. I want to go back to the Make Davar, the Netziv, because he has a really, really amazing idea also here. And he says over here, now this is, I didn't want to like overthrow the source sheet, but basically this is a commentary on a different pasuk in Shmos where it says lo yachel chametz. Okay, so you should not eat chametz. And what does he say? Kedei la'ashrish hazchira balev, in order to lashrish is like to implant, right? In order to really internalize the idea, this remembering in our heart, this commemoration, let's say, okay? Al yedei eze pu'ula hamar'eh umazkir ze ha'inyan tziviti. So in order to take in this concept, and really he's talking about the concept of Hashem, okay, of honoring Hashem by listening to him, okay, by doing the mitzvahs, so that we do this activity that reflects and reminds us about this concept that I commanded you, okay? Shelo ya'achal chametz. De matzah ein ba yitaron al yedei tachbulot, or in ba yitaron al yedei tachbulot yedei ha'adam laha'alot ha'isa yoter me'akemach ve'hamayim shenivraim mimenu yisbarach. I'll go through that. I know it was like a long sentence, okay? But basically, what is the yitaron of matzah? what's the benefit of matzah? That it doesn't have, I'm saying it the wrong way around, but basically the idea of matzah is that it doesn't benefit from the tachbulot yedei ha'adam. It's just such an interesting way of saying it, right? That the machinations or the scheming of people, leha'alot ha'isa yoter me'akemach, to enable the dough to rise or to become, something other than or something bigger than just the flour and water that are in it, which were created by Hashem. Right? The flour and the water, we get those naturally from Hashem. Hashem created all the water. Hashem, gave us grain, and obviously we grind it up, but it's essentially, there's nothing added to it in order to use it. These are what do they call in like whole, what people who eat like whole foods, these are whole foods, okay? They're like in their natural state. We're not doing anything to it. We're not genetically modifying it in any way, okay? But masha'en kain chametz. Okay, which is not true about chametz. Sholet bam tachbulot ha'adam, right? Because where does chametz come from? It's from experimentation. My kids were actually saying to me the other day, like, how did people, start thinking of bread? How did they know that yeast was gonna, make the bread rise? And I don't really know the answer to that question, but except that really ultimately everything comes from Hashem. But trial and error, I guess, and all of these different things. And sourdough obviously like rises by itself, but there's an idea of time, and there is an idea of like man, doing something, people doing something to it to enable that to happen. And the whole idea is that right, to sort of raise the dough up through leavening. Mishum hachi hu ot shekiyum Yisrael hu rak beruach Hashem. And the eating of matzah is an oat. It's a sign that we are keeping shekiyum Yisrael, that Am Yisrael are keeping like the idea that that everything comes just through the Ruach Hashem. And what he's saying is essentially that when we use yeast, right, obviously we're supposed to use yeast, right? Like most of the year we're supposed to use yeast, but 1 week out of the year we don't use yeast and we eat only matzah. And what he's saying is that we eat the matzah as a way of showing that we know that Hashem is above us. We know that Hashem created us and created the world, and we acknowledge that whatever schemes we can think of or that we like run throughout our daily lives, they may not be the truth. They may not be emes, and therefore, like 1 week a year, we remove ourselves from that, and we eat just the pure ingredients that Hashem has given us. And through eating the pure ingredients that Hashem has given us, it's a sign, but it also enables us. And that's really the key. That's really what I wanted to get to today, which is that, this is a in the now present energy that we're connecting to. Like I said, right from the beginning, right? This isn't lezecher yitzias Mitzrayim. It's bechol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo. Right? We are trying to see ourselves as if we ourselves are leaving Mitzrayim. And we do that through these rituals of removing the chametz, which represents ego, right? Searching ourselves. Now, that's a hard thing to do. So Hashem gives us this physical ritual, the Chazal give us this physical ritual that we do, which really opens the door to our doing this in a spiritual way. And then we have this other physical ritual, which is of eating the matzah. And this physical ritual of eating the matzah enables us to imbibe, imbue, insert, implant, all these different words, but the midah of anava. By eating the matzah, obviously, it's something that we have to frame ourselves. We have to enable ourselves to see this. We have to, go into this framework that we see that matzah is actually, doing something for us for spiritual growth, right? It's not just a food. It's not just a ritual. It's not just a zecher. It's an actual like, it's essentially like taking medicine, and I'm going to go into the Zohar in 1 second to say that the Zohar actually says that biprat, like specifically, excuse me, that eating matzah is what enables us to have the midah of anava. Or it's not the only thing, but it's an opportunity to take advantage, to connect to that energy, that for the rest of the year, we will have an easier time. We will be able to access that midah of anava in a more real way. So I wanna go to the Zohar, because there's very, very essential concept, which is, okay, now this is it's in Aramaic, obviously, okay? So we'll work through it a little bit together. But kad nafku Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, when Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim, lo have yade ikara uraza de mehem nusa. They had no knowledge or concept of the idea of faith. Mehemanusa is how you say faith in Aramaic. Okay, it's a very important word. So mehemanusa means faith. Emuna, you can see the word emuna in there. Okay, but Bnei Israel had no concept of what faith is, what emuna is. Amar kuchabrichu, so Hashem said to them, Yitamun Yisrael asvata, excuse me, that Bnei Israel should taste. Asvata means the remedy or the medicine. Ve'ad the yechlun asvatada, and when they eat this remedy, this medicine, lo ischaze lahon mechla achara, and they should not eat anything else. Meaning they shouldn't eat chametz. Okay, they should isolate this medicine of matzah and not eat anything else. Kevan de'achlu matzah, when they ate the matzah, once they ate the matzah, de'ihi asvata leme'al uminda beraza b'demehem nusa. They were able to, when they ate this medicine, they were able to understand and have the knowledge. They discovered, let's say, the raza, like the secret of emuna, of faith. Amar kuchabrichu. Mikan vilahala, from now and henceforth, eat chazelon chametz. They will be able to eat chametz. Why? V'yechlun le, and they ate it. Daha lo yachil leniz kalun, because it cannot harm them. V'kol shekain de biyoma de shavuot. Okay, we're not going to go into the rest of it, but basically the idea is, you could ask, well, if chametz is so bad, then why do we ever eat it? And I'll give you the answer, which is, I don't know how many of you know the song, Little Har Sinai, just a bit, I am a mountain so very high, right? The kids singing and gone about which mountain, the Torah would be given on. And this one thought, it's going to be given on me because I'm so tall. And I'm so, this one thought because I'm so wide and, right. And Little Har Sinai said, it's not going to be me because I'm so tiny. And yet, right, the Torah was, we know, given on Har Sinai. So there's two aspects to that, though, right? On one hand, Little Har Sinai, because Har Sinai had anava. At the same time, the Torah was not given in a valley. The Torah was not given in a hole in the ground. The Torah was given on a mountain. Okay, so there's a healthy aspect of ego, and there's an unhealthy aspect of ego, right? We have to have a certain amount of ego in order to do anything in this world. We want to have the confidence to go for a job interview. We want to have the confidence to, make a decision and put boundaries for our kids and for ourselves. We want to be able to, make a dinner and feel like, okay, I have faith that it's gonna come out. We do have to have some aspect of ego, but we want to have the healthy version of ego. We want to have the idea, the ability to stand and to do and to use the talents and the abilities that Hashem gave us in a good way. What we don't want to have is to take up all the space. What we don't want to have is to not leave room for anybody else. What we don't want to have is to be so self-concerned and so, caught up in our ego because it's so big that, that we can't see anything else. We can't see anything from a new perspective. So once a year for 1 week, we remove the chametz and we eat the matzah as a yearly, infusion of anava, a yearly infusion of the energy that we need in order to have a healthy ego the rest of the year. And like Hashem, like the Zohar says, that Hashem, Hashem said, once they ate the matzah, once we have this week, then we can go, and we know that Shavuot is all about the shtei lechem, the two loaves, right? We davka, we don't put them on the mizbeach, but we davka wave, these two loaves of bread, which are chametz. So we're going from, Pesach, where we say like, no chametz, like it's the worst thing in the world. That's for this week. It really is. We have to stay away from it as far as we possibly can. But then we're counting up. When we say we're counting up, right, to Shavuot, and then Shavuot is like the symbol of Shavuot is the ego, but it has to be that way because it's a process. It's a retreat, like a yearly retreat that we get, this week of imposed from the outside. Stay away from the ego, train ourselves, eat the matzah, take in this, this bread of faith, of poverty, of remembering what happened to our forefathers in Egypt, of anava, so that then the rest of the year we can come into it with a healthy attitude. And I just wanted to say one more, there's one more little piece of this, which I hope will bring it even more together for everybody, which is that if you look at the words chametz and matzah, we know that there's really only one little, difference between them. Okay, they have two of the same letters. The mem and the tzadik are the same letters, and chametz has this chet, and hey, and matzah has a hey. So, in addition to the concept of chet being the first letter of chet, sin, and hey being like one of the letters that we always use to refer to Hashem. So aside from that, the physical build of the letters is a very interesting thing, right? If you look at the chet, there's an opening only on the bottom, and it's closed on the other three sides, and so that in some ways it represents this like sort of blown up kind of self-absorbed. I'm like a closed kind of unit, whereas the hey has this opening to above. And that's really the idea. We're opening, just like the Netziv says, we have to open up ourselves to this concept that Hashem is above us, that, we don't know everything. We are not the be all and end all of knowledge. We have to understand that there's someone above us. There's, Hashem gave us these mitzvahs, and we have to develop, we have to, incorporate the concept of anava, of looking to him and of leaving space for him and his laws in order to keep ourselves in check. And I put down on the bottom, the last source on your sheet, the serenity prayer, because I think it's really la'inyan. I think it's really like a very, very good thing to keep in mind, not just this week, but in life in general. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And essentially Pesach every year is an infusion, like I said before, of the ability to tap into that energy. That there's a master of the universe, that I'm not him, that that there's other people around me, that I have to be aware of their needs and their feelings. I also have to be aware of my own misperceptions of myself and play things that I'm ways that I'm limiting myself and ways that I'm stuck, and Be'ezrat Hashem, like when we come into Pesach and we understand that there's an active energy in the world, especially the night of the Seder, that we can really take advantage of strengthening ourselves to do this work for the whole rest of the year until next Pesach comes. And as we said before, it's cyclical. So next Pesach, Be'ezrat Hashem will all be, first of all, we should all be healthy, but we should all be, in an even healthier place, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and we can do this work all over again from that new perspective. So I want to wish everybody a Chag Sameach, Chag Kasher v'Sameach, and a successful looking for our own chametz and a successful infusing ourselves with the energy and the opening that is the matzah.